the road to Franklin, where the war marched quietly. Before the bullets flew, the road whispered, Clovercroft carried a war not yet named. In the hills just outside Franklin, Tennessee, along a quiet stretch of Clovercroft Road, the past is buried just beneath the surface. Long before the sprawl of suburbs and paved driveways, this was contested ground, where silence met strategy, and where the road to Murfreesboro became a corridor of consequence. It wasn't a battlefield in name, but it was in purpose. In late 1864, as Union and Confederate armies clashed in the heart of Tennessee, farms like Clovercroft became more than homesteads. They became staging grounds, supply routes, field hospitals, and sometimes grave sites. The land here saw the build-up to the Battle of Franklin, and in its aftermath it bore the scars of a nation torn in two. The fences may have been replaced, but the ridgelines remain the same. They once hid artillery. The creeks still trickle through gullies, where soldiers may have washed blood from their hands or whispered final prayers. This was Braxton Bragg's corridor north. This was the same terrain that Union troops under Schofield fell back across, just days before planting themselves at Franklin to halt Hood's advance. One house along Clovercroft Road, built around 1830, still stands. Locals call it the Breezeway, a dog-trot home that saw both sides pass by, Union columns marching eastward, Confederates shadowing them in anger and desperation. Other homes, like the Joseph Wilson house, didn't survive, but the soil remains rich with memory. In those final weeks of 1864, this road witnessed more than footsteps. It heard the creak of wagon wheels heavy with the wounded. It carried the shouts of couriers, the cries of mothers, and the silent resignation of men who knew they wouldn't make it home. My name is Elijah Martin. I was 16 when the war came to our door. My father had passed the year before, and it was just me, my mama, and my sister tending to the fields. We heard them before we saw them, Union men first, blue coats coated in dust, eyes hollow, voices low. They asked for water, then for directions. A few days later, the gray coats followed, angrier, hungrier, more desperate. Mama made bread from our last flour and handed it to a limping boy no older than me. He tipped his hat, said nothing, and disappeared over the ridge. That night, we slept in the cellar, clutching each other through the sounds of cannon fire echoing from Franklin. I still remember the sulfur in the air the next morning. 2 soldiers, one blue, one gray, lay dead near the split rail fence. We buried them under a cedar and marked it with a stone. No names, no words, just boys torn from different homes, brought here to die on the same dirt. It's easy to pass it now without knowing. But for those who listen closely, Clovercroft Farm still tells its story, the story of soldiers who didn't die in headlines, but in fields, of families who left dinner tables to find their land seized for war, of a war that touched even the quietest corners of Tennessee. Today, the road still runs from Franklin to Murfreesboro, but to understand its past, you don't need a map. You need only stand still and listen.